This week, Ryan Chapman, author and certified SANS instructor, joins us to discuss ransomware infection vectors. In the security news, WebP is pissing off web browsers as Chrome and Firefox issue patches for web peeing stuff. The free download manager that comes with extra free stuff like pwning your Linux box. If you have a Kali account on your VPN, you might have trouble. CPU microcode updates you should and should not apply. There are no patches because there's no more company. The Flipper Zero Bluetooth low energy Apple prank that has nothing to do with the Flipper Zero. When your .git leaks, it's a safe bet that MGM has suffered a ransomware attack. See what I did there? Safe bet. More reasons why you should authenticate RF transmissions, snooping on every police officer's body cam, and Microsoft says no more third-party printer drivers. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. SOC analysts are often overworked and underappreciated. In fact, many consider leaving their jobs or changing careers altogether. Devo is hosting the third annual SOC Analyst Appreciation Day to pay some long overdue kudos to analysts and encourage organizations to improve their job satisfaction and mental well-being. Join Devo and other cybersecurity industry professionals on October 18th for sessions and panels focused on de-stressing, SOC career development, and more. Visit securityweekly.com/Devo to register. Hey, welcome to Paul's Security Weekly, coming to you in low definition, compliments of Darth Vader himself. It's episode number 798, being recorded on September 13th, 2023, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. I am flying solo in the studio, but on the lines remotely, we've got some spectacular co-host. Mr. Aaron Leland has joined us. Aaron, welcome.
Hi, Paul. Tell us all about where you got your t-shirt, and is that your favorite hacker movie?
It is. Hackers is in fact my favorite hacker movie, and I ordered this t-shirt from Etsy.
Oh, and also, I kind of put two and two together about your martial arts instruction. Is that where the early talk came from about what Kung Fu movies taught me about hacking or cybersecurity?
That is correct. I was I studied Kung Fu for a number of years. And
I literally only put that together. Yes. I only put that together tonight, and I feel bad about that.
I did a talk on it.
Not such the fan that I used to be. But thanks for having me.
Hey, it's good to have you on. Any more questions for me? No? Okay. Mr. Josh Marpet is here with us. Josh, welcome.
Thank you. And I have to ask, Paul, how often do you look in the mirror and go, I know Kung Fu?
Maybe once or twice.
A day or a month?
Every time,
or an hour.
Every time I'm in front of the mirror.
Every time I'm in front of the mirror.
Mr. Sam Bown is here with us. Sam, welcome.
Hello, glad to be with you.
Back from a little extended vacation. It's good to see you, Mr. Tyler Robinson.
It's good to be back, buddy. Missed you guys a lot.
I missed you too. I have so much to talk about with you.
I know.
We got to talk about the Apple Bluetooth low energy stuff. We got to talk about soccer. I tell you, I'm coaching rec soccer now. I'm thinking of you, so we gotta talk. We gotta talk more. All right. Did I get everyone? I didn't miss anyone, right? We're having some technical difficulties prior to the show. Let's hope those hold off until at least after the show. Make sure you follow Security Weekly on Twitter for live stream reminders, highlighted clips, maybe some memes and more. You can find them at Sec Weekly. If you want all the links to my social media, podcast gear recommendation, links to the podcast I listen to, technical how-to blog posts, and links to my upcoming and previous presentations, you can visit my website at securitypodcaster.com. Ryan Chapman works as a principal incident response consultant and is the author of SANS FOR 528. Can we just say Forensics 528? I'm going to say Forensics 528. Ransomware for Incident Responders course. He chairs the yearly SANS Ransomware Summit, teaches SANS Forensics 610 reverse engineering malware, and is the former lead of the CactusCon Security Conference. Ryan thoroughly enjoys presenting, running workshops, and learning from others. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to be here.
It is so nice to have you, Ryan. Ryan, how did you get your start in information security?
So I actually, back in high school, I took a concurrent enrollment class at the local community college, and I took programming. I just wanted to take computer programming, and it ended up being assembly language. And shortly after that, so
I thought you were going to say HTML, but you went the complete opposite direction, which is hilarious.
It surprised me. It was pretty low level, if you will. And shortly after that, I realized and kind of learned that the Texas Instruments TI-85 calculator that I had at the time, and I'm obviously dating myself at this point, I had a Z80 processor, and you could write assembly for it. So many people had these calculators at school, and they would play games written in BASIC. And I started loading up assembly games and learning assembly. And then from there, it was just kind of off to the races. I learned about Soft Ice. Anyone remember Soft Ice? The kernel level debugger from the Win9X family. And being able to suppress Control-D and drop into a debugger, like no matter what was going on in Windows world, was just phenomenal. And the crack me tutorials and all that fun stuff, I got hooked. And eventually, when I went through higher education, if you will, went to college, I went a little late, I took a little break, and had my own business doing IT. I was hooking up printers for people and charging crazy money in the Silicon Valley. It was ridiculous. So I decided I would get a big boy job. And my first job was in a security operations center after I graduated. And so that appreciation for the SOC appreciation day, actually, because that's where I got my start.
That's awesome. And how did you get teaching for SANS?
So SANS, I'm trying to, can I bust myself out here?
Careful. Careful.
I know. I'm like, let me think this through for a second.
Ryan, don't hurt yourself. Okay.
I took
there's no pressure. There's no pressure.
Right. I took an in-person class in 2018. I want to say December, actually. And we won the class coin, our team, and then we were doing the Cyber Defender Net Wars, and we won that. And when we won it, I noticed that there were some instructors up at the front of the room, and they were running the rest of the show. And I thought to myself, what would be a better time than right now to go up and be like, "Hi, I'm Ryan. Our team just won this, and I've always wanted to be a SANS guy somehow. Like, let's talk." And so that's what I did. I just walked up to him and said hello, and just kind of from there, communication was ongoing. And then a couple months later, I was invited to SANS instructor training. And then by December 2019, I was instructing. I was training for 610 reverse engineering. Oh, I love malware.
That's awesome. Good for you, man. I'm sure your early assembly programming days helped you with the reverse engineering. So it's a good path. It is a path, right? Not the only path. Not all of us have the luxury of starting out with assembly. Some of us have to learn it later.
I'm sorry. Did you say assembly and luxury in the same sentence?
I did. You believe that?
Okay.
If you believe that, I got a whole lot more things to say.
I got a bridge in Brooklyn that's got your name on it. Okay.
Oh boy, where do we want to start, Ryan? We want to jump right into ransomware. Yeah, let's jump right into ransomware. So what? So you're teaching more of like reverse engineering side. So then how did you transition into like doing a lot with ransomware kind of stuff?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. So a number of clients for SANS, like larger clients who buy vouchers often, right? Mm-hmm. They put a lot of money into training their personnel. They were asking for instructors to do talks on certain things. And so SANS decided to come up with a program called Ask an Instructor. Mm-hmm. And it was literally a larger company puts out the requests. I want to talk to this particular type of person about this thing, and I want it tailored to our group. And the Ask an Instructor questions that came in for ransomware, they made their way directly first to the 610 instructors because many people, ransomware is malware, right? And so let's go talk to the malware people. And it happened to come to me, Anuj Soni, who's the co-author of Forensics 610, the reverse engineering, and the solo author of 710, advanced malware analysis. he was like, "Hey, Ryan, do you want to do this?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." So I got the opportunity, and I immediately started talking to these larger organizations about, ransomware isn't just a binary. It's not just a payload, a .exe DLL file that executes and then bad stuff happens. Like, that's not ransomware anymore. And so I went through the whole evolution of what's occurred. And after giving a number of those talks, SANS approached me and was like, "Hey, do you want to write a course on ransomware?" And I said, "Hey, duh." And we went from there.
Nice. It's not, I don't think SANS asked that question very often, right? There's a finite number of classes that are offered. So taking advantage of that is certainly a good thing. So when you set out to write a class on ransomware, how did you start like putting some of the pieces together and like modules and things like that? Because we contextualize ransomware as like the result of a whole bunch of threat actors doing evil hacking things, not necessarily like a thing. You know what I mean? Like it's more of the result of the compromise than it is the actual compromise. So how did you put the modules together for ransomware?
So I started with the evolution of ransomware, starting out with, going back, quote unquote, back in the day. I'm going to say 2014 is when it really started kicking up. And then the advent of human operated ransomware, and then ransomware as a service, where you have humans that are actually carrying out a larger scale attack, similar to, back then it was like the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain, where they have research and weaponization and initial entry. And now we've adopted, essentially everyone's on the MITRE attack matrix, right? So I started with, this is how these particular groups get in, right? And then who are the groups in the first place? So what's the evolution of them? What is ransomware as a service? How do the core developers bring on affiliates? And why is that important?
Mm-hmm.
And broke it down to, the attacks are very, very different. Like in Forensics 508 is our advanced IR course, right? And it's heavily focused on APT. A lot of really slick sleuthing for just hidden, crazy, weird things that APT groups like to do. Ransomware is not like that much at all. Actually, it's quite the opposite. They're loud and they're ridiculous, and they bring in mimikatz_trunk.zip. So it was like, let me categorize the different teams that are out there and take amalgamations of them and build out 2 ransomware teams that attack a victim organization. And the victim organization is an extermination company, and I chose that because I wanted to show the domino effect. That you don't have to be, like MGM Grand is going through some stuff right now, like you mentioned, right? You don't have to be this massive organization, whether it's financial, whatever it might be. But the impact of any organization, any group being hit by ransomware and just going and being down, services not being rendered, right? That has a major impact. So an extermination company, they have SLAs, service level agreements. They could have a 6-hour, 12-hour, 20, whatever it is. I made up some for the class. But if there's a daycare that has an infestation, but that company's been hit with ransomware, now that daycare has to release those children back to their parents. Well, it's 11 a.m. in the middle of the day or something like that, right? So how does that work out? How many people then are affected and have to leave their jobs and so on? Mm-hmm. So I chose to show the impact that, and we can go over some reports here about the general sizes of companies, and a large chunk of the companies that get hit with ransomware are 101 to 1,000 users, essentially employees. And there's also a decent sized chunk of just 1 to 10 employees. A lot of people think they're much bigger groups. So we focus on 2 different types of scenarios where you have a not well-tooled environment at all. Like many of us consultants will come into an organization and they won't have much at all in the way of, there's no EDR. I mean, heck, there might not even be an endpoint protection or AV, right? It might just be Windows Defender is on or off for that matter. So if you come into that type of situation, whether you're first party and like that's you, or you're a third party consultant, MSSP, whatever it might be, how do you pull the proper artifacts to learn as much as you can? And then on the other side of the coin, we have a slightly more sophisticated attacker who is, again, it's all just pulled from the various cases I've seen and researched over time. But they have an EDR. Well, they have Sysmon. They have Sysmon in place, but they also have VPC flow logging in their AWS instance. So they have all the firewall logs, right? And so we talk about basically how to use the wealth of data that you might run into in some organizations versus the exact opposite of that, and just relying on Windows being a little bit of a snitch and just, having these little fun artifacts left behind that we can go snoop through and find out what happened. So I wrote the overall thing. Yeah.
Do you think that is some of the reason we're running into so many different threat actor groups and or ransomware groups that are targeting across so many different orgs is because the discrepancy between 1 and 1,000 and 1,000 and 10,000 is just a different tool set and does not always lend itself to more technology equals better logging or better protection. Is that why we're seeing some of these different groups pop up and or target different areas?
I think so. Some of the groups are very specific in terms of the sectors, the verticals, whatever they want to attack. Vice Society, which is believed to have moved mostly to, I'll pronounce it Residia is how I pronounce the new name of the crew. They've gone out after higher education, colleges, universities, constantly. It's what they do. And meanwhile, you have others who are just all over the board. And we have others who are working with initial access brokers, IABs, whose the entire underbelly of their darknet marketplace, the whole thing that they do is get into organizations and then just sell that access to whoever. Sometimes it's the highest bidder, sometimes it's multiple bidders, sadly. But we see that organizations, you'll work cases with small dentist office with like 9 employees, 5 employees. And then you'll see the exact opposite where you see something like, MGM with thousands of employees and a whole lot of disparate systems and domains and large force and all kinds of stuff. So I think that sometimes it's a little more dependent on the affiliate program and how it's run and how they essentially teach those people and train those people to go after certain organizations. And then other times it's just a wide net approach, just throwing it out there, using access from, info stealers and things like that, the credential grabbers, if you will, whatever you want to call them. Used to be called banking Trojans, malware as a service kind of stuff. And just getting access in and going like, all right, well, let's just go with it. Let's just run with it. So some of the groups seem to target certain types of organizations, and then others are just all over the place. And the verticals that get hit the most, they change often. Construction's usually up at the top there, but they often will change. And so, yeah, sometimes.
But that makes it makes it difficult for us, Ryan, as defenders, right? If there's no rhyme or reason to who is being targeted when. It's almost in the attacker's benefit to do it that way because it forces us to lack focus, right? I think earlier days of ransomware were like, oh, they're really going after like this type of organization. So we should put those organizations on alert and they should do these things and have multi-factor and be ready for it, right? But what I hear you saying to where it's progressed today is it's really everyone. Like it doesn't matter because you may have some groups out there that are like I think I would, if I were to put my evil hat on, I'd go, how many dentist office are there in the US? What's the median revenue for a dentist office? How much can I ransom them for? Because typically their security is not going to be as sophisticated as a large organization. So let's say there's, 10,000 dentist offices in the United States. Well, if I go after all of them and an average ransom of whatever, okay, I can make a few $1,000,000, right? And it's pretty easy because their security kind of sucks, right? But then you've got other ones that are going for like an MGM, a higher payout, right? And everywhere in between, which is it's a threat we all have to face.
I want to point out one little minor factor that bugged me, and I apologize, but both of you bugged me with this MGM talk. Just because they have that many employees doesn't mean they're competent.
Yeah. I don't think it's number of employees, Josh. I think you're right. I agree. I think it's more your ability to defend or not defend your network or infrastructure is not dependent on how many employees you have.
Yeah, there's small companies that I know that have, 5 or 6 incredible network admins and security people and IAM people that do an incredible job, like insane. And there's large companies that suck.
Yeah.
Suck. So I'm sorry, it's nitpicking. I apologize, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Ryan, speaking of the MGM breach, now my brain's just going to a different thing. When you look at ransomware, what do you think the average dwell time is before the ransom is dropped, and what factors go into what that dwell time is?
So when it comes to stats, every report, every group has different numbers.
Yeah.
You know, my day job, my employer, primary employer, we put out reports through our lens. We work a number of those cases. Groups like Coveware, their initial foray into all this was recovery, so negotiations. That's what they were doing. They see a lot of stuff because they're on a lot of insurance panels, and other groups, you know, Mandiants, the CrowdStrikes, all the other bigger folks. You see these reports come out, and the numbers compete every time, and they're so different sometimes. The general dwell time that I've seen consistently is around 5 to 7 days, and I'm going to stick by that just because the deviations it's swung so crazily. You know, you can go to thedeferreports.com, which is a phenomenal website with a ton of free, amazing content. There's no other I will shill for them, by the way. I'm not part of the group. I actually am a patron via Patreon of them. I pay them money. I love them. Anyway, they have a number of articles on there where they have their honey nets and honey pots. It's a group of volunteers, essentially. And they let the threat actors come in and do all their little shenanigans, right? But they have amazing telemetry in their environments. And then they just do these big old report and, you know, very technical and detailed write-ups. They have examples of, like, back in, you know, 2, 3, 4 years ago now, the Ryuk ransomware crew doing their thing, including data theft within 5 hours. They have one 24 hours. They've got like a 15 or, you know, whatever. I've seen and worked cases that have been less than a day with a decent amount of data exfiltration. And we also see where we have like outliers that really muddy the waters with the initial access brokers. You may have an initial access broker who gets into an environment, say just RDP brute forcing, credential stuffing, something like that. And then they'll sit on it. Now, they might not be technically sitting on it. They might be trying to sell it, and they might just not sell it in a timely manner, if you will.
Yeah.
But sometimes they could be in there for weeks or months. And then you look at it, you're like, well, what's the dwell time? Well, do you count it from when the ransomware actor or affiliate was handed that access?
Yeah.
Whether it's purchased, right? Or do you say, like, well, technically they were in there for 4.5 months. Well, were they really in there?
Well,
so that, I think.
And here's where I'm going, Ryan, with that. And it's you painted a very nice picture and teed it up nicely for where I'm going next, which is when I was looking at the MGM, I'm just using MGM as an example. This could really be a number of different cases, right? Where like all of their systems were down. Like we're at the point where like you can't use an ATM. Parking is free because we can't figure that out. And so my brain's going to, how long were the attackers in there to figure out what all those systems are? And does that take time? Or is the organization just leaning on, well, every computer that we have is part of Active Directory. Once you get into Active Directory, you can spread the infection over Active Directory, and like they don't need to know where all the systems are or what they do. They just know everything is Active Directory connected, so we're just going to, spray that forward. And then like, how do you balance as an organization? Well, it's convenient for us to have everything in Active Directory, but that means when we put all our eggs in one basket, so when we get hit, it could be bad. I don't know where the actual question is, but you kind of know where I'm going. Like,
no, 100%.
From the attacker so let's start with the attacker standpoint. From the attacker standpoint, how long do I have to dwell to be really effective at ransomware in any given organization?
These days,
I think there's one distinction there though for Ryan, right? Like one thing to that Ryan's going to touch on here, and I think that it's very important for us to realize when we start to talk about ransomware groups and the actors, like there is nothing different from a typical pen test, a red team, getting into different organizations. Those of us that do offensive security, right? Like the different orgs, even from inside of an org, region to region or office to office, like those things can change between systems. And there's nothing that says a pen tester or a red teamer or a ransomware operator doesn't go on vacation, doesn't have stuff come up in life, is not just a dedicated group of people that are on keyboard 24/7, right? They have limited time. They don't always have the same number of resources between people. And so when we make that distinction that ransomware groups are kind of different, they're this separate thing, we have to really be careful because they are no different than a pen tester, a red teamer, and or a human, and or limited with resources, time, and the same constraints that any pen tester has. So as Ryan looks at that, keep that in mind. Like as we think through this, we can't separate ransomware actors as this completely separate entity that's got magic up their sleeve or has magic time built into something.
Actually, the opposite, to be honest. I agree with you in that they're not some magic team. They actually have playbooks that they follow. The affiliate groups are often given like literally a playbook, A to Z, step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of thing. I can show from the Conti leaks in February, March 2022, before they went out of the picture, they had an Active Directory attack manual that they were handing out to their affiliates, basically. And it was like, step 1, go on, these various sites to see like what company you in and how much money do they make. And step 2 is invoke share finder and try to find shares. What kind of shares? Well, inside the shares, look for these keywords. And it was like, look for finances and taxes. And like, it was very, very specific. But what I see a lot, and what a lot of the research is starting to show now, people are realizing that not only is Active Directory a massive problem once the threat actor gains access to it, and just generally doing that, while that might be considered the keys to the kingdom and like the overall objective, actions on objective is owning Active Directory, right? It's so simple these days, it's not even funny. There's so many service accounts that are running tasks or services or remote processes from WMIC that launch from some random third party on some service account that's highly overprivileged. It's like a DA, domain admin, for whatever reason. We see it all the time. But we put so much.
File systems need domain admin. What's wrong with you, man? Come on. I'm kidding. I'm kidding, of course. Exactly. And I excoriate companies that do that. It's like you have a Surface account for an integration between two obscure programs that you barely use. Why does it have domain admin access? Like, oh, well, that was the easiest way to get it to work.
Yep.
Okay.
That or the vendor suggested it because the vendor doesn't want to deal with trying to work through your AD problems. So they're like, oh, yeah, just make it, add these permissions. And it's like, like a big old list of permissions.
But the API is encrypted. Sorry.
We put so much in Active Directory that the threat actors, something like Bloodhound, just running Bloodhound. And we've even seen them bring in Ping Castle, which is a commercial Active Directory analysis scanner, enumerator, discoverer, whatever you want to call them. And we see them bring in Bloodhound, and they will get so much data from Active Directory. They're using like Microsoft's own AD Explorer. And just pulling all the descriptions and data that we have. And for that matter, we name our systems so that they're easy to work with, right? File servers start with file or something like that. Backup servers, begin with or end with BKP or something like that. So it's very easy.
Parking server 1 through 30, right? Yeah.
And if a DC doesn't have DC in the name, I'd be surprised these days.
Right.
It's going to have DC in the name somewhere, right? So on top of that, another thing that we're finding is very problematic, single sign-on and single sign-on interface applications. Now, bear with me here. I love Okta and Duo. I think they're freaking phenomenal. However, once a threat actor gains access to a single account, right, and goes into Okta, bypasses MFA via SIM swapping or smishing, let's get into that. Those are new infection vectors we're seeing now for ransomware included. Once they've done that, they have pretty little tiles. I almost call them beautiful. They have tiles like application A, B, C, and then every other damn application within the environment. And then threat actors just go boop, 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 and they just start clicking through. They're like, oh, you use GitLab. Cool. Oh, you use Jira. Cool. Oh, you use ServiceNow. Cool. And I have access to it. And I can scrape some page data and I can grab a key from it with, oh, look, you're an admin in the instance. That's awesome. And they're using that also to just start going through the organization, finding all the stuff they have. And another thing to throw in is it's cute for all of us to think that we don't have flat networks and that we're all properly VLANed off and we don't have, implicit trust via every domain that we own, whatever. Yeah, we do. The royal we.
Speaking of the casinos.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a lot of organizations too, and also to Ryan's point, right? Yeah, no, that's. Oh, so I want to talk about the SMS phishing and the smishing, vishing, whatever ishing you wanted to talk about, Ryan. Has this always been an infection vector for ransomware, or is it the way they're using it that's somewhat newer and novel?
So it has not, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen out if that's all right. I'm going to first pull up a website. So this is my screen share is coming in 3, 2, 1. You should have it now.
Yes.
So this is Coveware, and they are a competitor to myself and many of my buddies. But anyway, they do have quite a bit of visibility because they're on so many insurance panels, right? They have a blog, right? So the blog's at the top right-hand side of their page. And if I go to the little blog right here, every couple months, they drop an article. One came out, the most recent, July 21st, right? So I click on this, and this is about monetization and rates falling and so on and so forth. What I'm specifically wanting to show you, though, is that in almost all of their articles, and they've been doing this for a number of years now, and I just absolutely love it, is they include graphics, infographics, if you will, pertaining to things like infection vector. And if I'm going to scroll, so give it a second here. It's going to be a little jaunting until we get down to
what data is this based on? Is this based on what they're observing over
this is through their lens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
This is their, and that's a lot of groups don't mention that in their reports. They just put these reports out, and you're like, okay, well, what did Mandy and where'd that data set come from? The cases they work, like that's where it comes from, right? And that's what this Coveware data is all about. So in here, you can see that back in 2018, right? We had, what did we have? We had RDP, we had phishing. Those were the two big ones. I mean, look at those numbers. RDP is way the heck up there, and phishing is kind of rounds out to the 100%, right? Over time, you see RDP essentially dropping, and you see phishing going up. But then notice down here, these little guys, technically those guys are what I'm trying to show you. Now, if you're colorblind like me, those two colors are those. And I believe that unknown is this one now. So we're at the Q2 2023, so a couple months ago, right? Oh, what is that? Around 30%-ish? Is that like the 30% line there? Or quote unquote unknown? What? That is very, very different. So we've said for years the top 3 infection vectors are RDP, email, and then software vulnerabilities, exploitation. And I don't mean 0 days. Everyone says, oh, they use 0 days. Not very commonly. No, a patch comes out, a CVE is assigned, a patch comes out. It's well known. It's been out for a couple of months or a couple of years. It never gets applied. Like we talked about yesterday, Paul, is you may acquire a company, and with that company comes a bunch of appliances and devices. You're like, oh, do I need to patch? You don't even know it's there, right? So they just
I don't think out. Why would you burn an O-Day for ransomware? Because you're going to be very noisy. You're going to be very noisy about it. Maybe you do. Maybe the payoff is worth it. But I would think I would want to use my 0 day in other means that aren't as noisy. Because at some point in a ransomware, you got to tell the company like, "Hey, I pwned you," right? And as soon as you do that, all eyeballs go to, well,
boom.
What was the initial attack vector, right? And if that uncovers a 0 day, that's going to get patched, and then you just burned it, right? For one ransomware event.
Well, so that's the thing. The two biggest examples I throw out there are the Kaseya 0 day and then the more recent Move It 0 day. Those were very, very successful because the teams who leveraged them were able to leverage them at scale and hit a number of people.
Supply
at one
chain.
time.
So supply chain using a 0 day in a supply chain attack is where it's at.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. So they are doing that. But you stop and you look at, okay, if they're not primarily coming in via the big 3, I've called them the big 3 in my class since I wrote the class on day 1. My first thing I did was, how do they get in? Like, start there, right? And yeah, they're moving more to, we see CVEs, and I'm talking about like the appliances. I'll stop my screen share here. I can just kill this now. Just showing that those numbers have changed so much. Just kill that. The frequency is the word I want. The frequency of these threat actors using something like the devices that protect us. Right. Yeah.
We were just talking about that.
So VPNs.
We were just talking about that, Ryan, on a Below the Surface podcast I did earlier today that'll be out, I believe, next week with Nate Warfield. I know Tyler and others know Nate. He's awesome. He's one of my coworkers at Eclipsium. And it's done a lot of research into we call them network devices. Most people also call them appliances, right? Especially if you got experience 20 years ago. Appliances were all the rage. And just, we list out all the reasons why threat actors would want to go after them, right? They're exposed to the internet, typically, like you were saying, right? They're critical to your function, so it's a VPN appliance, got to be exposed to the internet. There's typically not great monitoring on these systems. You can persist because there's not a lot of great tools to detect. There's no EDR on my SSL VPN appliance, as an example, right? I mean, the list can go on as to why they would want to do that. There's great ways to persist on there that we really dug into on that show. All a great lead into, I think, Ryan, what you described for me is it's not the ransom itself. I'm not just ransoming your network device or appliance. It's the jumping off point for these attackers today because of all the reasons I mentioned, right?
Yeah, we often don't see the devices themselves actually encrypted, but rather we'll see, a compromise, and then they throw a web shell on there and they go, ooh, now I just have access to it. And oftentimes organizations are hyper focused on which server did they get into, not really like just in general, how'd they get in the first place. And they may not see those things. They don't know how to look for web shells. What's a web shell, kind of thing. So we run into that a lot, and it's sad.
But wait, and also to Josh's point, there's Active Directory credentials on there because, well, there's at least a service account for a VPN, because the VPN has to authenticate users, so it needs to tie to your directory system, which is most often Active Directory. And when you do that, now there's some link there and some typically service account, or as Josh pointed out, domain admin account on the device that's hanging out on the internet that hasn't had a patch since 2018 because of operational risk to patching these devices. And oh, by the way, when you bring them down, all of the VPN connections drop, right?
Yes, 100%. The number of the appliances, devices, whatever we want to call them, that are, as I say, plumbed into Active Directory is ridiculous. But what's really, I should say it's high, but what is ridiculous are the privileges associated with those accounts. Like we already tapped it, a little bit. And it's like, why? Why is that happening? It needs to do the most basic LDAP reads possibly, or maybe just look for these. We're going to add every permission under the sun. We're going to give it DC object sync capabilities so the DC sync attack would work with it. Like just these crazy, crazy things.
Well, because I think I want to put some color around that, because I have many, many years ago configured these. I don't remember if I tied it into we actually had at the university at the time straight LDAP and Kerberos without Active Directory. So we had directory services, but it wasn't yet Active Directory. That was still coming around. So I don't remember which
only
I had
in
to
university.
Because we had to do federated identity and directory services well before I think much of the industry did, because we had so many users and we had to trust other organizations. So that was a big thing even 20 years ago in universities, right? Now we're talking about this in enterprises more and more today. But anyway, I configured that and I was like, oh yeah, I had to link that to be able to authenticate users to coming in. And I'm like, oh, and now they're being attacked and this is the link. So you definitely had to, even back then you had to do that.
Yeah. That's my response. Yeah.
It was painful. It was painful to do straight LDAP and Kerberos, let me tell you. You kids,
Can I just ask?
Walked uphill both ways on the SSL VPN. Sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
Thank you. Can I just ask, Ryan, is this impossible to stop, or is zero trust architectures the answer?
I don't believe in zero trust architecture, simply because I don't know that anyone I've ever
implements it correctly.
Yeah, exactly. So because of that, I just think it's a myth.
I'm with you. Unless it's a pure greenfield zero trust architecture, it's just nonsense and noise, right? But I'll take it back to the start of the question. Is this impossible to stop?
I believe so. I believe it is impossible to stop. And the reason I believe that is that the attacks are so low scale. Brute forcing with, the administrator account, literally just capital A administrator on a Windows server with RDP open, right? Doing credential stuffing with, winter 2023 exclamation point. Oh, that still works in 2023. Why? Why is that a thing? the royal we are not learning. And I don't know that we ever will. And you can, my day job, we provide an XDR, extended detection and response. You can have all kinds of fun. You could have Zeke, the former bro, right? You can have Zeke running and doing SSL decryption with your big firewalls or Fortinets or Palos or whatever it may be. But the thing is that it's security 101 is where all the failures are really happening. It's security 101, basic freaking things, and things that even Microsoft has been kind of handing people for years now. Like, it's rare, and I mean rare, that I come into an environment and they have credential guard on, or for that matter, that they even have a domain force level of 2016, right? So they don't have credential guard, they don't have exploit guard, they're not using the protected users groups. And we can advocate for these things and be like, you need these, and here's why, and protect your LSAS and all this stuff. And it just gets over and over and over and over. And I kind of see it like phishing. Are you ever going to stop phishing? No, it's just not going to happen. Are you ever going to stop the fact that you have so many rapid deployments for X, Y, and Z reasons, that you have companies being acquired? Like, it's never going to stop. So how do we fix it? Education and training is the big thing, because it's so many times a security 101 failure. Sure, the 0 days, did that really count too? Yes, it did. Because look at Kaseya. A lot of the organizations that got hit by the Kaseya 0 day, the real reason it was effective for many of them is not just because Kaseya was a trusted product in general, but because the destination folders, directories, sysvols, whatever, where Kaseya was being directed to deliver, right, to deploy in their EPPs and AVs, they were whitelisting them. They were approved listing the entire directory, because they're like, well, that's where Kaseya puts stuff. I don't want to deal with any problems. So I'm not going to alert on that. I'm not going to log on that. I'm just going to go like, whatever's in there, that's fine. But then when Kaseya was popped and used to send bad stuff, the systems were like, that's Kaseya. Like, we're good. We're fine. There were many people who had their EPPs that were not allow listing, the deployment directories, and caught the ransomware. Like, what's that? No, stop that. So it all boils down to these security 101 problems. And the more we educate us, the better. But I don't see it going away. And that I want to pivot back if we could. That reminds me of educating and talking about the new infection vectors that we're seeing a lot. Is it all right to jump into
go ahead.
So SMS phishing, smishing is the term, which sounds so ridiculous, but I guess phishing sounded silly originally, right? So SMS phishing, smishing is huge, as is MFA bypass is huge in terms of the potential impact and its level of success. There are a number of groups out who are using this a lot more, and we see something as simple as like the Uber attack back in, was that last year? What year was that? When they got into Uber?
2 years ago? I'm guessing 2 years ago would be my guess. I could be wrong.
Time goes too fast. I don't remember when exactly it was. How did they get into Uber? It was an MFA bomb attack. What is that? It's when you keep sending an MFA request to someone's, you have their credentials and you're like, hey, and they go, no, that's not me. No, that's not me. And then eventually they say, fine. And they just approve, That's how they got into Uber. So MFA and smishing are huge problems because of the lack of visibility we have into those, the lack of controls we have available for those. And we can get into greater detail on those specifically if you want to go down that path. And the thing is that we've got groups like, there's a group that goes by a number of different names. So their most commonly known name is Scattered Spider. They're also known as Muddled Libra by Palo Alto. Like, everyone has their own name for them essentially. But they are a group that is financially motivated, and they do upstream and downstream attacks, and they're really good at spinning up domains and getting into organizations via smishing. So it'll be like SSO dash in the company name, or the company name dash okta.xyz or something silly like that. And they're phishing users, and when they get into individual user when they receive credentials, they then, if they run into MFA, they will do one of two basic things to bypass it. They'll call the help desk and just social engineer them into removing MFA. Hey, I lost my phone. I broke my phone yesterday. That sucks. I got a new phone. Can you click the button? They go, sure. Like that, as simple as that. And then the other one is just SIM swapping. and they have a very large landscape of methodologies of doing this. They have people on the payroll who work at the mobile stores. They break into certain organizations and have access to their own tooling to do SIM swaps. They just socially engineer.
They steal the manager's tablet. It's really funny, Ryan. It's not funny, but I was explaining this to the store manager at a local AT&T store because we were sitting. I mean, he was doing something for me. I forget what changes I was making in my plan or doing something. It was taking some time, so I was just talking with him, and I'm like, "Oh, you know about like SIM swapping?" He's like, yeah. They tell us about that stuff. I'm like, you know, people just come in and like will steal your manager, like that tablet. I'm like, that you're holding right now. Like you put it down, someone's come in and just steal it, and they're gonna take your tablet and they're gonna go do a whole bunch of SIM swapping, knowing that they have a time window, like how much time it takes, hour, 2 hours, whatever it is on average, before you can call someone to get revoke access to your tablet. He's like, oh, I didn't know they would just come in and like steal a tablet. Like that's pretty bold. I'm like, yeah, man. I'm like, don't let it happen here, because like my cell phone shit is here. You got to be on alert. Tell all your store manager buddies, especially around here, right? So yeah, it's there was a Darknet Diaries episode where he did like a deep dive into the SIM swapping, and it's very similar, Ryan, right, to ransomware actors or threat actors in general. That like farm out different activities, right? The SIM swapping is like a total like multiple group scheme. You got the holder that holds the phone that you're going to swap to, right? You got the holder of the credentials that doesn't have the second factor but has the credentials. Then you got the person who like stole the tablet that's doing the actual swapping. Did I miss anyone? I feel like there's at least 3 people in the chain, and weirdly enough, like they're young teenagers oftentimes too that do that. And I think some of that. Go ahead, Josh.
Typically, it's $400 is the fee to pay for a SIM swap in a store. An illegal SIM swap, to be clear.
So that's just if you're paying off an employee, the holder gets a fee. Like everyone gets a cut of what you're doing, because you could be SIM swapping. In a lot of cases, we're not talking about. I mean, we're talking about ransomware now. But if you're talking about just cryptocurrency stealing, if I'm SIM swapping to get in someone's crypto wallet, it's got like $500,000 in it. I can afford to pay everyone in that chain $500 or $1,000, right? It's going to pay off in the end. So
yes,
I was just ranting. I was just yammering.
No, you're good. You're good. I love that. I personally didn't even think about stealing the tablet, to be honest.
Right, for whatever reason that sticks out to me, because we've all been in the store and we've seen that's the magic tablet that can do all the things, right? And before they do things, they got to ask me, permission and stuff like that. Which I wonder how do they get around that? Do they have? They must have to ask me that question to access my account, right?
Well, so that depends. Some of the groups don't have to ask specific questions in order to access the accounts. Like they don't have to put in a certain value. They have access to the account and they have the option of verifying, and it's part of the process to do so.
Right.
And part of the thing that I recommend for folks to deal with SIM swapping just in general right away, don't use MFA based on SMS, on text messages. Stop it. Use an actual push-based authentication. And if you can, have one that's push-based and also requests a number to be put in, which would avoid just general MFA bombing. It doesn't mean they'll get a message that says, hey, I need you to put in the number 42, whatever. That's one. And the other is calling up the organizations. Now, this is not going to help, by the way, if someone's on payroll. Mm-hmm. Okay, but calling the organizations and saying, hey, I need to put a PIN on my account or passcode a PIN to protect it from being accessed at all. And then on top of that, some groups have a secondary PIN for transfers, which is basically SIM swaps.
Yep.
And you can do that. But the problem is the onus of that is usually on your employers, because oftentimes you don't have phones that have MDM restrictions. There's no VPNs on them, things of that nature. And rather it's BYOD, bring your own device.
Yes.
Right. So what are you going to teach your entire, workforce? Hey, if you have Verizon, call this number. If you have T-Mobile, like really, is that going to happen? I think it should. But the onus is on them to do that. It is a modicum of protection, but there's still ways around that. So personally, I view SMS MFA as nearly useless at this point. Obviously, I'm being dramatic here. It's a layer, and of course, yeah. If you can't have anything else, then use it. But it's it's not secure, and it's so easily circumvented by these folks. I was on a call with someone recently, and they were SIM swapped while we were on the call. The call just dropped, and they called me back via FaceTime, and they're like, all right, so I just got an email that says my SIM was changed. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool story. So the groups like Scattered Spider is just a big name I'm throwing out there because they're getting a lot of press recently. That group has recently, a part of that group, it's a very large structured group with all kinds of roles like you were talking about. They have a subgroup of them that has now become an affiliate for the Alpha V ransomware crew, also known as Black Cat. And so they are so good at getting into organizations and getting back in after they're evicted, as I like to call it now. The new term is eviction, right, from your environment. Getting back in. And they're pilfering data left and right, and then going to your clients and going to your vendors and hacking into them and all this fun stuff. And then now they're at the end, they're like, I might as well encrypt it also. So we're seeing that. And I fear that a big part of why the percentage of infection vectors for many groups is more unknown than in the past, because a lot of these vectors we're not looking into and we're not aware of it. And people aren't doing things like domain research and alerting on domains that are derivatives of your company name, like something basic like that. And then again, if you don't have, if your phone is just hanging out on your own network, your provider's network, then you're not having URLs, recently generated domains, whatever your firewalls or whatever might be blocking internally, like on network, that's not occurring. And even companies that do put an MDM that has like an always on VPN, what they're often not doing is full tunneling. They're doing split tunneling so that whatever you need to connect to work-wise, that goes over the VPN, but everything else still goes over your provider. So you don't have those protection levels. So you have your employees call up and secure their accounts the best they can, request pins be added, but can you make them do that? No, it's their phone, right? And then on top of that, don't use SMS, MFA. Stop it. Stop doing that.
And keep your phone up to date too, because a lot of it is the phishing over SMS phishing, right? Is I get a contextualized text message like, oh, you're traveling, so I'm going to send you a text message like click here to go check on your flight because it's been canceled or something, right? Got to make sure your phones are up to date, because the one-click and even zero-click exploits are out there. And yeah, we patch them, but then new ones just come around. And I feel like that's mostly initial folks that have those, or like NSO group type people that are using it for spying. But I think slowly it starts trickling out, right, into ransomware groups as well.
I agree with that. I fearfully agree with that.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. Especially the zero-click ones are really scary.
Ew, right? They're just going to send a message and done.
Done.
Yeah. The terrifying thing that we really are just starting to realize too is we've always known that ransomware has the ability to take down business. We've always had, crippling hospitals, schools, all the things like very monetarily demoralizing and or brand reputation is damaging. But we're getting to the point where the destructive nature and the ability for ransomware to control things like an entire company via the hypervisor level or single sign on all the SaaS applications that then has trickle-down effect for supply chains, for markets, for capital investment, VC, even stock prices and dollars for the timing of these things. Like, we're getting to the point where the control of the hardware and the software that make the world go round is getting to a point where we have ransomware groups starting to understand some geopolitical things and or getting a little bit more intelligent on how business works and how they can monetize this in a more efficient manner, and do it at scale with less tooling and less points of discovery. Like VMware is terrifying. The hypervisor, like a lot less, EDRs, a lot less monitoring, and has the ability to take down all your AD and Linux apps and all your customer data in one fell swoop. So we're getting to that point where we're getting into a dangerous situation of the world can be brought to its knees fairly quickly, and or these ransomware groups are now having a lot more control while they're gaining more money, which lends itself to geopolitical things that we're just not ready or capable of really expanding on or understanding fully. And I think we're getting to that point to where we have to have big decision makers really pushing the envelope to ensure we have the resources, people, and or expertise that can go after these people and do something about it.
Quick, someone clip that. Is that what the kids say? Clip that. Someone clip that.
Needs to go
your
on
new
TikTok.
title. Your new title for this episode is Harbinger of Doom, but 100%. Yep. When the Ukraine conflict first kicked off, the Conti ransomware crew, which was the largest at the time for a couple of solid years, they came out in support of Russia. And that was actually led to their downfall, technically, because they had a Ukrainian with access to their stuff who was like, nah, and they ended up leaking all their stuff. But anyway, these ransomware groups putting their force behind what they do for geopolitical reasons is scary. And there's also, I don't have a lot of empirical data, and there's a lot that I can't reference that I may be aware of, but some ransomware encryption events, which we're not seeing encryption in all ransom cases these days, by the way. It's another big shift, big change. As I update my course, I'm changing my course title from ransomware for incident responders to ransomware and data theft extortion. So because that's such a big thing. But we see that there are these, APT style espionage, just straight up espionage attacks. And then the ransomware is being used similar to how a DDoS would be used, as in like, go over there, go take care of that. Don't look over here. You go over there.
Yeah.
Look, encryption. Ooh, bad. Don't look over there. I'm doing something else. And that's also something that I very much worry about.
Yeah, the smoke and mirrors and attribution piece of ransomware, and the ability for APT and nation states to sneak in under the radar and or use the cover of ransom and or the attribution initial, first brokerage for gaining access to intelligence without having the risk of, the geopolitical fallout of whatever they're doing, has gotten to be a real issue. And I blame us a lot kind of around that, just because we're so quick to wanting to provide attribution and have someone to blame, that it has to be just one group or it has to be just one thing. And yet we can't see the bigger picture of why would a large nation state not do this, and or maybe have an agent within inside of these ransomware groups that says, hey, maybe we should look over here, or hey, Magic, look what I found. Now we ransom this place, and guess what? Now you've cleaned up and covered the trail without having any huge flags and alerts that need to go up in order to clear logs and remove the initial access and or initial operation or mission, so that no one cares. It's ransomware. It's just ransomware. Just pay it. We'll move on, or don't pay it, and all the data has been deleted and encrypted. It's fine. That
it is very often that crews like mine are not called in for ransomware. It's rather a destroy and greenfield. You know what I mean? It's like, all right, well, that's gone. And the ability to hide, like, what is one of the best anti-forensic methods is to deploy ransomware. Fill up the AV logs and fill up the you get the idea. But yeah, 100% agree. And it, right? It's worrisome. It's very, very worrisome.
Ryan, I have 5 questions left for you. Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Heck yeah, let's do it.
3 words to describe yourself.
Talkative, inquisitive, talkative.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Hands. Oh, that got a little dark.
His words.
Why'd you make me answer that? Oh, come on.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Oh. Well, you stumped me. A book about myself with the title be. Damn.
It's a good title.
Just like that with exclamation point.
That's right. Exclamation point.
Damn.
What is your favorite
Nice.
hacker? What is your favorite hacker movie?
Hackers. Oh, classic. I gotta go with Hackers.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents. Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
My parents. Oh, wow. I don't know that I'm gonna get a good answer to that one. Celebrities to be my parents? Oh, done. The parents from the Vacation series.
Yes.
Chevy Chase and
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Beverly D'Angelo.
Yes, you got it.
Done.
Ryan, give a plug for your SANS courses one last time.
All right, cool. So I write Forensics 528, which is currently called Ransomware for Incident Responders. It's a 4-day course. The 4th day is a full day CTF where you get to do hands-on, a massive data set curated over a number of months. Absolutely love the course, and looking for people who are interested in knowing truly how to respond to ransomware. And the reason for that, my making it in the first place, is because so few groups are prepared for when ransomware hits. It's almost always the same level of devastation. And a big part of it is, I mean, sure, it's a devastating event, but a big part of it is just lack of planning. And that sucks. So I have for anyone who wants some free cool stuff, if you go to for528.com/workshop and also /workshop23, you can register for a free 2-hour workshop that I gave based on the course. One of those is the GitHub repo with documents and fun stuff and downloads. And the other is you can just log into a free SANS account and watch the actual recording. Our Ransomware Summit is annual now. We just did our second one a couple months ago, and we're already planned for May 31st, 2024. It feels weird to say. It's too early to be talking about 2024. Stop it. But if you go to
It's in the show notes. Yeah. All the links to what you're talking about, Ryan, are in the show notes. I think the one you're looking for is for528.com/summit24.
24. Yeah, that's.
I think it says 20. It says 23 in the show notes, but I think 24.
Yeah.
Will
So
work.
22 and 23, I linked them to our YouTube playlist, so you can go watch all the last year's content. And then 24 is like, hey, you can register coming up.
Awesome.
And that's enough for now. I appreciate you giving me a bit of your platform here, and thanks.
Ryan, thanks for coming on the show. Coming up next, stay tuned. It's the Security News.